Hey guys, hope you're doing well. Today we're going to talk about circles and their equations, and then we're going to practice with them. So please remember the following, the things that we've talked about before in this class. The first is the formula for circumference and what circumference is. And what it is the length around a circle, so it's kind of like perimeter of triangles and rectangles, except now it's a little different because obviously a circle, it's a little bit harder than just adding up the sides. So you have to use the formula 2 pi r, which is the same as pi d, because if you think about it, 2 times the radius is the diameter. The diameter is the length from end to end, while the radius is the length from the end to the center of a circle. And now we have that leads straight into the area of a circle, which is just pi r squared. Hopefully you know that one by now. And then we also have the general form of a circle, which is x squared plus y squared plus dx plus ey plus f equals 0, which is a really confusing one, kind of hard to work with. But then you get into the center radius form of a circle, and that's a little bit more preferred. That's what we like to have it in, because we can really look at that form and see some factors about the circle, so we can get an idea of what it looks like on the graph, its radius, and things like that. And so that's x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared, where the center is at hk and the radius is r. And like I said, we want to use this formula as much as we can. So the key here is remembering that to go from general to circle radius form, you have to complete the square, which is probably something you did in Algebra 2 and probably dreaded, but it's coming back. It might have been Algebra 1, I'm not sure. But you have to do that to go from this confusing form in general to the preferred form right here. So let's get into some practice here. So, looking at the formulas we just talked about, if a circle has a radius of 5 and is centered around the origin, so its center is at the origin, I should say, what is its equation? Its radius and its circumference. Well, the radius I already gave, that's right there. So the radius is 5, but what's the equation? That's kind of the more important thing. So let's say y equals, and we probably want to do that circle radius, the formula right here, the center radius form of a circle, kind of the easier one. So I do y equals x minus h squared. So let's think about what hk is. So we know hk is the center, and in this case we know the center is the origin, so it's just 0, 0. And now we can go straight into that, and we know r equals 5. So we have everything we need. Pretty simple problem here to get the equation of the circle. It's going to be y equals x minus 0 squared plus y minus 0 squared. And we don't want to say y equals because we want to set it equal to r squared. And well, what is r squared? Well, it's 5 squared. So let me rewrite this over here. 25, because that's 5 squared, equals, and instead of x minus 0 squared, I can just say x squared, right? X squared plus y squared. That is the equation of the circle. The radius is 5, so we already answered that question. Then it also says what is the circumference, so we got to think of that formula. I remember that circumference equals 2 pi r, which is the same as pi d. Well, in this case, I'm given the radius, so it's easier to just use the 2 pi r formula here. And so c equals 2 times 5 is 10 pi. So that is the length around my circle, and that is the equation of my circle up here. So hopefully that makes sense, and now let's move on to the next one. So now if a circle has the equation of 64 equals x minus 1 squared plus which equals y plus 2 squared, what is the center, circumference, and area? So this is a good problem. This is challenging. You kind of make sure that you really understand the formula for a circle. And remember that it's x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. I've said that a lot. I sound like a broken record now, but just memorize that formula as good as you can. And we see that that's not what we have right here. We don't have it in the form we want. But it's pretty easy to get it that way. And what we want to do is we want to bring this over to the other side. So I'm going to add that, and I would get 64 equals y plus 2 squared plus x minus 1 squared. I just brought that to the other side, but then I just want to reorder it. I just don't like the way this looks right now. I'm going to say, well, it's x, not plus 1, x minus 1 squared plus y plus 2 squared equals 64, just because this is what I'm used to seeing it in, and now I have a lot of questions about it, so I just want it in the easiest form for me. So what is its center? Well, that's the easy one. The center is at hk, and knowing the formula of a circle, well, it's x minus h, so it's x minus 1, so h must just be a 1. And then now we have y plus 2. Well, the formula calls for y minus k, so if y minus k equals positive 2, that right there, then k must be -2. So it's 1, -2. One way to think about it is it's always going to be, the center is always going to be the opposite of what it is in here. So here we had a -1, and the h is the +1. Here we had +2, the k is the -2. So that's the center. Center is at 1, 2. Answered that one, 1, -2. And now the circumference. So c equals, like we said, 2 pi r and pi d. D for diameter. And we're not just given the radius, we have to find it. But if we remember, again, this formula for a circle, we know that this equals r squared. So 64 equals r squared. Take square root of both sides. We know that r equals 8. So now I'm going to use my 2 pi r formula, and c equals 16 pi. So now I have the circumference as well. Lastly, the area. I'll write that up here. A equals pi r squared. R is 8, so A equals 8 squared times pi. So A equals 64 pi. So we have the area, we have the circumference, and we have the center. And that's all we need to figure out, and we got it. So on to the next one. Here's our last question in this video, and this one is pretty challenging. So it says if a circle goes through the point 10, 7 and is centered around the point 519, find its area, circumference, diameter, and equation. Sorry about that. So if it goes through the point 10, 7, it's centered around 519. So what do we have to do here? Well, let's think about the formula for a circle. X minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. Well, I have h and k, so I know hk equals the center, and we're given the center. It's 519. So what I have right now, I have x minus 5 squared plus y minus 19 squared equals r squared. So now the question is, how can I find the radius? So I recommend you pause it right now and really think about this. This is a good challenging question. See if you can figure out how to find the radius here. But if not, I'm going to go right into it. So if we're given a point that it goes through, and we are also given the center, let's think about what we have here at a coordinate plane. Just a rough sketch of one. We're all in the positive quadrant, so I'll draw it here. We have 519, we'll say that's here. Then I have 10, 7 here. So if I know this is on the edge of a circle and that other one's the center, I've got to be looking at something like this. Super rough sketch. But that means that the distance from that point to the center, this has to be the radius. The distance from the center to any point on the outside is the radius. If it was this point, this point, this point, anything, it doesn't matter. So what that means is that if I find that distance, I have the radius, which is what I need. So this goes back to the previous video. See how everything's coming together a little bit here. We have to use the distance formula. And so now remember that d equals the square root of y2 minus y1 squared plus x2 minus x1 squared minus x1 squared. Let me make sure that's clearer. Okay, so now we need to take our 2 points and use that. It doesn't matter which one you say is the first one or which one you say is the second one. You just have to be consistent when you plug it in. So we're going to have square root of, let's make this point number 2, and this will be point 1. So 1 and 2. So y2 is the 19 minus y1 is the 7. I'm going to square that, and then I'm going to add x2 is 5 minus x1 is 10, and I'm going to square that as well. So 19 minus 7 is 12 squared plus 5 minus 5 is -5, quantity squared. And now if I square both of those, 12 squared is 144. -5 squared, it's negative times negative, so it becomes a positive 25. And I get the square root of 169, and that is 13. And that equals r, the radius. Because the distance between those 2 points is the radius, and we just found it was 100 and square root of 169, which equals 13, we found the radius is 13. So what we have now is we have that this is 13 squared. And if I want to rewrite it, because I would want to put it all together, I would say the equation of the circle is, let me write it here, x minus 5 squared plus y minus 19 squared equals 13 squared, which is 169. This is the equation of my circle. But that's not all the questions it asks, I don't think. It also wants the area, the circumference, and the diameter. Okay, so the easiest one is the diameter. So let's do that first. Remember the formula for diameter. D equals 2 times the radius. Well, we figured out that the radius was 13, so it's just 2 times 13 equals 26. So this question really tests you on everything. And now the next question was circumference. That's an easy one to go to from here. We know that it's pi times d, or 2 pi r. Well, if I just figured out that that diameter was 26, I know that the circumference must be 26 pi, because the formula is just, like I said, pi times d. Then lastly, we want the area. So A equals pi r squared, and we know that r squared equals 169 because that's part of the formula of a circle. So A equals 169 pi. So that's the answer to everything. So hopefully you can really see that once we have the circle in this form right here, this one, we can really figure out a lot of things really quickly. That's why we really like to get it into that form from this the general form. So that's the benefit of that. Hopefully you've memorized these formulas by now. I know it can be a lot. The area of a circle formula, hopefully you have. The distance formula gets involved here. There's a lot of things you've got to know, but hopefully this video was good practice for you, and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for watching.